Green, Jolly Green, this is Sandy 6. Roger, Jolly's, where are you at? I'm actually going to have to make this quick because 405 is about 1,600 pounds of gas total.
I guess both survivors are pretty bad shape.
Jolly, this is Sandy 6 again. What's the deal there now?
And talk about the experience. What was your job on the aircraft?
Well, first, yeah, my job was kind of threefold. I did the pre-flight of the helicopter. I prepped the weight and balance, prepped the toll data, takeoff and landing data, and I was a number 2 gunner as well as a hoist operator. And then during cargo sling missions, I was the one in the cabin giving directions to the pilot. When the hoist operator on the H-53, when you came in, the guy would pop a smoke. Pilot would lose sight of that guy.
That'd be the survivor on the ground.
Yeah, he would lose sight of that guy. So about 200 or 300 feet out, I'd go hot mic. We had a little switch there. We popped the switch up, and we could talk without pressing an intercom button. And I would just give him a steady stream of directions. You know, the distance to him, and as I was doing that, I was lowering the hoist. I would lower the hoist down, so the hoist was going down while we were approaching. And the idea was to get the hoist on the ground right as it got to the guy, instead of dragging it through trees and stuff like that. So, the hoist operation, depending on the hover height, most of mine were 75 to 100 feet, but there were times that they went over 200 and they used every bit of cable up.
I was wondering how much cable was on the aircraft.
245 feet of cable, and when you reached that limit, the hoist stopped.
And the reason you would have to be at that altitude, people don't understand, those jungles, the triple canopy jungles, yes, were incredibly tall. Those trees were
They were phenomenal. 250 to 300 feet high, especially on the side of a steep mountainside, you know, where it was really steep. And then there were times when they lowered when I was at Da Nang, one of them lowered it into the trees to get the guy out. They got him out, but we had to change all the blades and inspect the drivetrain and all that. And
so you actually lowered the aircraft into the trees, we settled into the trees.
The rotor blades were chopping through tops of trees, and debris was flying all over.
Was he flying an H-53?
Pardon?
Was that an H-53?
Yeah, I think some H-3s did that too.
That had to just... That's a monster aircraft. It must have just chewed stuff up for miles and thrown it forever.
But it would rip the tip caps on the H-53 were, the removable tip caps were about 12 to 14 inches long, and it would just rip them up, you know. And then of course when you're flying back, if you got going too fast, the aircraft would really start to shake, you know. So they'd have to pick an airspeed where the aircraft vibration caused by the damaged rotor blades would, could be safely flown at.
I knew a Chinook pilot that when he would take rounds, he'd get that vibration. Mm-hmm. He carried an AK in the aircraft with him, and he would go out and he'd pace off the distance, mm-hmm, and he would go and shoot another round through the other rotor to balance it out until he got back. Yeah.
Well, there were now originally over there on some of the H-3s that they carried duct tape, and they'd wrap the blade where the holes were, the damage was, with duct tape, and make it fly a little bit smoother, you know.
I wonder if that's where the 200-mile-an-hour tape.
Yeah, we in the airline industry we use 600-mile-an-hour tape.
Yeah.
And it would if you punched a hole in the engine cowling or something like that, it wasn't structural. 600-mile-an-hour tape, and you'd write it up and send it to workload control, and they'd program it for repair at the repair station. You know. But my first mission there, I was in country. Let's see, a little over a month, and I was high bird that day.
Could you explain high bird and low bird for folks?
We always traveled in 2 helicopters and 2 A1s on orbits and like that. But on this particular day, we took off. We got scrambled because we were north alert, and my NCOIC, he was on the low bird, and we got up there and we were orbiting, and then we had to refuel, and when the low bird is the first one to go in to make the rescue. The high bird is there in case something goes wrong, where they have to go in there with the high bird to pick up the crew, and
I don't think people understand how important it was to have that second bird, because
Oh, yeah.
quite often that first helicopter would get shot up really bad, and you would have to abort the rescue of the person on the ground to
Right.
actually rescue the
right.
the
And that happened to one of our that happened in '68, I think it was. One of the B model H-53s was put down near Chapone, and the Hybrid came in and picked the crew up, and then the A-1s blew the aircraft up, you know, instead of leaving it there for the enemy. And but so the Hybrid there, but in this case on that day when the
So back to your mission. I'm
when,
sorry. I didn't mean
when
to
the
detract.
low bird, when he lost second stage tail rotor coming off the tanker, he lost hydraulics. The servo was 2-stage. He lost half the stage, and so we became low bird, and then we orbited up there waiting for the replacement high bird. So we, when the high bird got up there and the A-1s were working that area, it was on the North Vietnamese border. We call it the Fish's Mouth, the Bartholomew Pass, and the guy, F4 went in. His call sign was Banyan 03, and front seater went in with the airplane. The back seater got blown out of the airplane, and he landed on a upslope on a karst. Karst is a limestone outcroppings. There was this one looked like it's about 800-900 feet high, straight vertical wall of going straight up. But on the base of that karst was a kind of a 45-degree downslope, but it was covered with jungle foliage and vegetation. And we went north of Route 7 area, because Route 7 is the road that comes out of Bartholomew Pass from North Vietnam and goes into northern Laos. So we passed in an area, crossed over Route 7 in an area that was deemed safe by the Sandys. Then we went around north, then we headed east and came back in, crossed over Route 7 again to get to this guy that was on the ground. And when we came up to him, we faced the car, so we pulled straight up, and I couldn't see the smoke. There was no smoke at all. And he hovered there for maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds. And then he did a pedal turn to the left. So now instead of facing south, we were facing east. And the karst was on my side of the helicopter. And as soon as we turned that 90 degrees, ground fire erupted from 4 to 5 o'clock position off our tail level. They were right level with us. And then there was a bunch of, some guys on the ground that were shooting straight up at us. And the pilot was trying to tell us to get out of there.
The survivor on the ground
Yeah,
was?
the survivor, he threw his smoke downhill, and that's why the reason we didn't see it. He threw it down from him. And our tail gunner, he took 2 rounds through the side of the fuselage that hit him in a parachute, and it kind of knocked him to his right, which was the minigun then pointed to where the ground fire was coming from, and he opened up 2 and 4,000 rate, and he was just, imagine a sickle going through a hayfield. He was just cutting the brush down like a sickle. And there were tracers, red and green. Ours were red, theirs were green, coming up through the rotor blades, and everything seemed like it was in slow motion. You know, and the rear minigun was going, the cabin filled with smoke from the gunfire. And I'm leaning out the door. I got the hoist down just right over the foliage. I didn't want to put it in there because then I'd lose sight of it, and no telling who would grab a hold of it, you know. So I was waiting to see that red smoke and lower that to the smoke, you know, and I couldn't see him, and so I directed the pilot to back the helicopter up. and all the while I'm looking out, and then I told him I would move to the left, and then I told him I didn't see anything and moved back forward again, and then we moved back to the right again, and all this time they're shooting at us, and so my AC told the number one PJ, he said, get over there and help him see if you can see that smoke, you know. So again, we had him back up, went through the same routine, and we told him, he said, we don't see any smoke at all down there. And so he kind of just rolled off the side of the hover area there and headed back north across Route 7. A1s went with us because one of them was flying, and then we got to 8,000 feet, and he kind of flew around underneath us and off to the side, and our Highbird had picked us up. He was following us real close. He was, we couldn't use the fuel in the drop tanks because you got to pressurize the drop tanks, and with holes in them they wouldn't pressurize. So I couldn't use the fuel in the drop tanks. I just had what was in the mains, and the AC called for a tanker. And probably within about 10 or 15 minutes, the tanker pulled up beside, underneath us, and below us, and we made a run at the tanker. He hit the hose the first time, and I told him, I said, I'm only going to fill the mains up. And when the fuel started flowing, all the lights lit up. There's a refueling panel down here by my knee, and all the lights lit up, and I had the drop tank shut off. But they were filling anyway, it didn't matter, you know. And so about that time I heard this, one of the crew members in the back, boy, he was screaming back there, and I turned around, looked back in the cabin, and I couldn't see him. The whole cabin was filled with atomized jet fuel, you know, and we couldn't close the ramp because the hydraulic lines back there got shot out.
So it's just sucking through the
aircraft. Yeah, it's pulling the low pressure behind the helicopter, sucking that. The A1 called, he says, you got a rooster tail coming out of your right drop tank. And it was going up through the rotor blades, you know, getting atomized. In fact, the aircraft commander of the Highbird, when he saw all that fuel just spewing out from the back, he moved out about another, probably a quarter mile away, because he expected us to blow up.
How far was your position in the aircraft from the...
About 35 feet to the back of the ramp was 35
where the guy was
feet.
screaming. So you couldn't see 35 feet.
No, I couldn't. The whole cabin was just filled with the atomized jet fuel, you know.
Wow.
And there was one spark, and I mean, that thing would have just exploded. And so I told them, I said, have the tanker shut the fuel off. Because we got up to about 1,000 pounds in each main tank. They held 2,000, you know, so... the tanker shut the fuel off, and then the fuel dissipated, and when the fuel dropped down to about 400 to 500 pounds again, we had them fill it back up again, you know, and we stayed hooked to the tanker for about 45 minutes until we got the Lima Site 20 alternate. We landed there and taxied in and got, you know, finally shut down, and we counted 57 holes. The holes through the rotor blades, and the fuel was still spewing out of the drop tanks, but not, the mains were self-sealing, but the drop tanks weren't. They were filled with foam. But
so this is your first mission.
Yeah, my first. I say I got my feet wet, so to speak.
Got my feet wet with jet fuel.
Yeah. And
so
then the aircraft commander, we were looking the bird over, and I looked above the ramp, and there's a wire bundle back there, about that big around. It was just sliced right in half. You know? And I told him, I said, well, you look at there. He looks up, and we just turned, it's just white. Yeah, so I think the good Lord was looking after us.
Did you have any thoughts about what's the rest of my tour going to be like if this is day one?
Well, when that MiG shot the 28th of January, which was before this, when that MiG shot that one of our helicopters down, we lost the whole crew. I said, man, I don't know if I'm going to survive a year, you know. And then in March, we had a mission. That was a wolf.
Before we go to the next one, How did they ever recover that pilot on that
Yes,
mission?
our high bird became low bird. We got another high bird up there, and then about after dark, he went in there and made the rescue, picked the guy up, and
Was it uneventful, or did they run through a similar?
pretty much
situation?
uneventful. There one of the A1s had put a rocket nearby, and they thought it was a mortar or something that went off, but it wasn't. And next morning, the pilot that they rescued, his guy named Dotson, he briefed us. He asked who was all in that first bird there, and we raised our hands, and he says, "You guys pretty well wiped out everybody up there." He says because after you left, he said they picked up the weapons of all those that were killed and left me up there by myself. And we went in about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so this is around 7, because the sun had already gone down, so. And I found out later on that a year later he got shot down again. And he got rescued again by the 40th.
So he owes a lot of people a lot of drinks.
Oh, yeah.
I hear that when you guys run into pilots still, they're very gracious.
Yeah. And then when they find out you were a jolly, you're treated pretty well. So
It's not a bad way to earn a.
I looked over yonder, and what did I see? A big green giant coming after me. He was born one morning in the distant plain, buried in the valley so much green, 50 feet tall above the trees. A big, big giant called the Jolly Green. He could cover a mile in a single stride, towering high in all of his pride. He came swiftly through the jungle of steam to answer the call for the Jolly Green. He would answer a call during day or night, never fearing the enemy's might. Through shell and fire, he'd wade right through to complete the task he was asked to do.